Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're adding to our series on comically racist shit from TV and film with some liberal inspiration from this wildly racist scene from Lady and the Tramp.
We are Siamese, if you please.
Oof. Anyway, if you're like me, I certainly grew up using this clip as my main reference point for Siam, which is the former name of the geographic region now known as Thailand. Now, other than being one of the native origins of the Siamese cat, Thailand is also home to some of the most delicious rice noodle dishes that you will ever eat. So, I thought I'd use this as an excuse to get to a request that a lot of folks have been asking for, which is a Thai dish called Pad Kee Mao, or Thai Drunken Noodles, as they are known here in the States. For those who've been following along, a Pad Kee Mao actually has many similarities to another noodle dish that we have already done, which is a Pad See Ew. Not only do they both rely very heavily on the use of dark soy sauce and oyster sauce, but they also prominently feature the ingredient which many of you may know as my personal arch nemesis, which is fresh chow rice noodles. While this stuff is super delicious, they are also so hard to work with because of how delicate they are. So we'll be talking through some of my frustrations here as well. Aside from our chow and dark soy sauce elements, however, a Pad Kee Mao also contains a few additional veggies which you won't find in a Pad See Ew, which traditionally just contains gailan or Chinese broccoli. Today we'll be using some red bell pepper, broccoli, onion, and two of my personal favorites, some Thai chilies and Thai basil for those really iconic Thai flavors. So, let's get into it. Okay, so diving right in, I'm starting off with the constant that is in most of my recipes, which is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic, followed by 1 tablespoon or about 1 inch's worth of finely minced ginger. Then moving along to our veggies, I'm starting off by slicing up a red bell pepper here, de-seeding and then removing the membrane because that stuff gets pretty bitter in wok fries. I'm slicing these up into strips about 1 inch long to keep these nice and bite-sized. Then moving on to my onion, this is half of a sweet white onion here, which I'm similarly also slicing into 1 inch strips. Next up, I'm slicing up my broccoli here. Now, I mentioned this in our Pad See Ew recipe as well, but the more traditional go-to here would be Chinese broccoli or gailan. I actually grew up eating this stuff and can't stand it because of how bitter it is, so I'm going with some regular old broccoli instead, which is actually a pretty common sub here in the States. If you do use gailan though, just make sure to chop that stuff up into long, thin strips like I'm doing with my broccoli here. This is going to help us get a nice tender veggie in our flash fry. Then moving on to our Thai chilies, I'm using about 6 for my Pad Kee Mao today, which is going to give us a moderately spicy dish, so dial this up or down depending on your preferences at this point. Then last up for our veggies, this is about a 1/4 cup or roughly 30 leaves of Thai basil. Now, as a friendly reminder, if you can't find Thai basil, it does not taste very similar to regular sweet basil, so if you need to sub, I'd recommend using a star anise pod in the marinade to replace some of those licorice notes. Then finally, I'm whisking up 2 eggs to coat our noodles at the very end, and we're moving on to our sauce. So, as you can see in my notebook, I'm literally using the exact same recipe for my sauce and marinade here that I used in my Pad See Ew recipe. So I'm just going to speed right through this, but if you're looking for notes on this bit, definitely bop over to that recipe here. This is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce to start, followed by 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of dark vinegar, and 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce. Then rounding out our umami elements, this is 4 tablespoons of fish sauce and 2 tablespoons of sambal olek, followed by a pinch of kosher salt to taste. Moving on to our marinade here, I'm going with some ground pork this time, which as far as I can tell is used relatively interchangeably with the chicken thigh that we used in our Pad See Ew version. Otherwise though, our marinade again is going to be identical to our Pad See Ew recipe. This is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce to start, followed by 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing wine, half a teaspoon of white pepper, a star anise pod, and half a teaspoon of cornstarch. Then I'm tossing all of this to combine and marinating for 30 minutes or up to 1 hour while we get to my dreaded nemesis, 16 ounces or 1 pound of fresh chow rice noodles. Now, featured here is my second attempt at this dish, which is using chow fun that I literally bought at the market 20 minutes before filming this. If you are using older or relatively stale chow fun like I did with my first attempt, you'll want to separate those noodles off heat before you start cooking them to make sure that they don't clump up in the wok fry. Just to be careful here, I'm also going to do the same thing with my fresh noodles because I have become insanely paranoid about chow fun. Okay, over on the stove, I'm heating up my wok as hot as possible, then adding 4 tablespoons of peanut oil, and as always, long yao for your non-stick surface. Then I'm starting things off with my aromatic elements, garlic and ginger going in first, and blooming them for about 10 seconds until they become fragrant. Then next up are my Thai chilies. One more reminder to have your windows open before adding these or you're gonna have a coughing spell. Once these are nice and fragrant, I'm adding my ground pork to the wok, which is looking a little bit brain-like, but I assure you it's still ground pork. I'm giving this a toss for 2 to 3 minutes until nice and browned, and then removing from heat, rinsing off my wok, and reheating for our veggies. Okay, moving on to my veggies here, I'm adding 4 more tablespoons of peanut oil once my wok is nice and hot, and then giving it 1 more long yao. Then I'm starting things off with my broccoli and bell pepper here first. I'm giving these about a 1-minute head start before throwing my onions in, since they are a bit more durable than the onions. Once these are all in the wok, I'm tossing everything for another 2 minutes until my onions are cooked just past their raw stage. Then I'm pushing everything to one side of the wok and then adding 2 tablespoons of peanut oil followed by my Thai basil. Thai basil is very aromatic, so we really want to make sure it has plenty of time to bloom in that oil before letting things combine, otherwise you're not really going to get much flavor out of them. Finally, I'm adding my ground pork back to the wok, giving it 1 more toss, and we're ready to add our chow fun. Now, a couple of points here. You will notice first off that I'm adding my chow fun a handful at a time and then very, very gently turning the wok contents to combine. You will notice a dramatic difference between the more aggressive wok tossing that I was doing earlier. Once again, chow fun is extremely delicate, so if we're too aggressive, that stuff is gonna fall apart in the fry and you'll end up with crumbled rice noodles like this. Once all of my chow fun is in the wok, I'm adding my egg, followed by my sauce mixture about a 1/4 cup at a time, being careful to monitor the color, consistency, and taste with each addition. You're gonna wanna exercise some caution at this point and make sure that you're not over seasoning here. This is really easy to do with dark soy sauce because it is so concentrated. Once my eggs are set, I'm removing all of this from the wok and we're ready to eat. Okay, so including the various beef chow fun, Pad Kee and Pad Kee Mao attempts that I've already done, this has to be close to the 1 millionth meal or so that I've done with chow fun, and it still trips me up. If you're willing to take on that challenge though, this is one of my favorite Thai dishes of all time. It's super flavorful with really interesting layers of umami that sort of build on the dark soy sauce savory notes that we set up in our sauce. Then the Thai basil and Thai chili give it a really interesting aromatic heat that just feels super traditional and kind of reminds me of every Thai takeout meal I've ever eaten. I also thought that the use of ground mince combined with our extra veggies was an interesting deviation that still felt super classic, especially given all of the chicken thigh that we've been using in our Pad Thai and Pad See recipes of late. Plain and simple, this is one of my favorite Thai dishes of all time because of its combination of how flavorful and how hearty it is, and if you're ready to take on the challenge of fresh chow fun, I highly recommend it. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. If you haven't yet, definitely check out some of the other recipes from our TV and film hack series. There are a lot of them now. I'll also be cooking through this one live this coming Monday at 6:30 PST right here on the YouTube channel. So feel free to drop in on the live stream if you have any questions too. Also, don't forget to bop over to the all-new woocancook.com for all of the written recipes, schedule of releases and streams, new Woo Cooks, beats, tunes, and more. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be kind, and rewind. I'll see you soon. Bye.